We'll go ahead and get started. So this is, I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail last summer. It was a very cool experience, and I got to, so I'm talking about that and what that entails and going through the different sections and some of my pictures. And if you guys wanted to get interested, I have some resources for you guys there as well. So what is the Pacific Crest Trail? It was started in 1960, 68, as part of the National Scenic Trails Act, along with the Appalachian Trail. It goes from Mexico to Canada, and it's 2,650-ish miles. It depends what measurement we're using. And it's been popularized in through hiking. If you guys have seen Wild, it's the subject of that movie, more or less. And you don't have to do the whole thing at once. There, you can do whatever section you want, but permits are available for different parts of it. You can go through the Pacific Crest Trail Association or through the individual wildernesses. So some frequently asked questions. It takes about 4 to 5.5 months to hike the whole thing. I did it in just under 5, and that was with about a week and a half off to let the snow melt because it was a very high snow year. You build up the mileage as you go. So you start out going about 15 miles a day and then as you work your way up, you're eventually doing 25 miles, and it's, feels like a short day.
Because your endurance is
your endurance builds up. You get used to walking all day, and the terrain in Northern California and Oregon is actually the easiest terrain of the trail, so that you're able to just push out big miles around then. You typically want to start, if you're going south to north, in early spring. If you're going north to south, you're going to be starting in typically July 1st, because then the snow in Washington has melted a bit and you don't have to worry about that too much. For food, you resupply into towns by hitchhiking. Just stick them out, and typically all the locals in the area know Pacific Crest Trail hikers, so they're usually get a ride pretty quick. Yeah, in the backpack. You can tell because they have the expensive gear, but they look homeless.
Oh, yeah.
the smell.
That too. And you can probably smell us before you can see us. So you can stay connected to your family, because I know that's a big one for most people. There's quite a few spots along the trail where you get cell phone coverage, and wife or husband is worried, you can use a spot device as well. It doesn't weigh very much. They have a subscription-based fee for that. So I know some of them it's based on text messages or whatever that you send out. Some of them it's you have a few preset ones of I'm okay, I'm in trouble, and it sends the GPS location.
Is it a satellite-based thing?
Yeah,
Okay.
So the GPSs are satellite-based. The number of people that typically start hiking is around 3,000. Around 3,000 try to start a through hike every year, and they set up a long distance permit system for that, so that there's 50 people per day leaving the southern border. And along with this is the hiking Triple Crown. It consists of the Continental Divide Trail, the Appalachian Trail, and the Pacific Crest Trail. Each of them runs almost all the way across the country. The Continental Divide Trail goes along the Continental Divide, and it's about 2,800 miles to 3,000 miles, depending on what route they take. And the Appalachian Trail goes from Georgia to Maine.
How much did your pack weigh?
So my pack weighed, it was about 19 pounds before food and water, but I was on the heavier side. Or I was right around average. I could have dropped quite a bit of stuff if I wanted to. So there's 5 main sections of the trail. There's the desert section, which goes up until Kennedy Meadows or Walker Pass area in Lake Isabella. There's the Sierra section, which goes up to North Lake or South Lake Tahoe. That kind of depends on who you ask. But Tahoe area. Northern California is from Tahoe to the Oregon border. And Oregon and Washington are pretty straightforward. And there's just some numbers there for national monuments, state parks, and the permit system will actually, you apply for one Pacific Crest Trail Thruhiker permit, and it lets you access all of those. So rather than having to worry about each individual permit of, oh, I think I'm going to be in this park on this day in advance, you can just say, oh, I have a Thruhiker permit, and you're in the clear for all of these. So there's a diagram showing each section. It's pretty straightforward. I can come back to here if you guys have any questions about that. So the desert section, that's the monument right over here.
And there's the border there. Is that
so that's the border fence.
Wall.
Yeah.
Yeah. The wall. It doesn't look
Haven't
huge.
yet.
It's not huge. It's not huge yet.
Not quite. So there was actually a border guard there around the area, but there's 50 people leaving a day. They're used to seeing backpackers and recognizing backpackers. Some highlights of the desert section was Mount San Jacinto. There's a section about 10 miles where you walk along the LA aqueduct, and actually you can walk on top of the pipe there for a little bit. That's pretty cool. I have some pictures of that. There's Vasquez Rocks, Big Bear Forest, and Mojave. Challenges in the desert was scarce water sources and rattlesnakes, and just kind of getting used to hiking as a lifestyle. Rattlesnakes aren't super common. I know many people are scared of those. I saw about 6 for the whole month-ish, a little bit more than a month that I was in the desert. So, but they warn you before they're about to bite you, so you're in good shape. And if you're going northbound like I did, you want to start springtime. It depends on what pace you think you're going to be going. But the starting date is based on wanting to not be stuck in the desert when it's midsummer, because it's the desert and it's hot. And also not wanting to get to the Sierra Nevada mountains too early, because there's snow up until June, typically. So this is Vasquez Rocks right over here. I didn't get any great pictures of that really, but because it was sundown as we were coming to it, so you couldn't really see too much. This is Mount San Jacinto. We walk along the trail right up to about here, and then and then you come along this part, and you drop from about 10,000 feet to about 200 feet. So it's a lot of downhill there. This is the LA Aqueduct. It's pretty neat. You can't see the sign from there, but it says "Don't danger, don't go swimming," because I'm assuming they didn't want hikers to contaminate the water source. And this is actually the pipe here that you have to walk along. The trail is right over here, but I just had to walk on the pipe because I'm a rebel. And so this is the Mojave. This is just south of Mojave. It's the Mazana Wind Project, and there's more windmills than trees out here, so it's kind of cool. You can see them just going off for miles and miles, and that was cool to see. This is the Sierra section, so it goes from Walker Pass to Lake Isabella to North Lake Tahoe, and you want to typically the recommended start date is June 10th if you're going through it, and you start out right with Mount Whitney. I've got a picture of that. Highlights of it are Mount Whitney, the John Muir Trail, Yosemite, and just all the passes in this year were gorgeous. So challenges for that, creek crossings. We didn't have to cross this one, fortunately, but it was, it's a little bit of a challenge to find places to cross, especially like with last year being a high snow year. It was an extra challenge, and a lot of people actually ended up skipping the Sierra portion because of the creek crossings. So, I mean, snow you can deal with. You just have wet shoes all the time. But the creek crossings are the dangerous part. And 2 people last year actually died from creek crossings. So you typically will want to group up. And I think I have that. Yeah.
Is that your sleeping bag and
mattress.
That was somebody I was hiking with down here. So that's called cowboy camping. That's what he's doing. Just toss the tarp down and then
Noted.
yeah, it's my preferred way to sleep out in the wilderness.
There's no
nowadays.
He doesn't have bivy sack. I can't tell. Is there a
No,
bivy
no
sack?
bivy sack.
No.
Just because the sky was clear that night and
No bugs.
it's
What was the
there's no
coldest
bugs in there.
temperature you slept in without a
Sub freezing, a little bit below freezing, but I packed extra clothes and extra warm stuff for the Sierra because I was expecting it to be a lot colder than it actually was.
Did you ever wake up with animals on top of you?
Not in the Sierra because that was above 10,000 feet most of the time.
I've done that. I woke up and there's a little critter right there watching.
I had mice crawl across me in Oregon and Washington. That was fun.
It's better than spiders, though.
But
I'll take a mouse over.
I got
spider
a
any
spider bite in the desert actually.
Oh, really?
That one got infected. Had to get antibiotics for that one.
That's a storm shelter.
So this is Muir Hut, or sorry, that's the Mount Whitney hut. This is the top of Mount Whitney. That's the highest point in the continental U.S. and that's just a little 8-mile side trip from the Pacific Crest Trail. So you take a rest day from hiking and go hike more.
Up really high.
Yes, but I mean, if you're already there, you might as well just get the rest of it done. And there's just a little $20 extra permit fee when you apply for your PCT permit to get the permits for that, and it allows you to go climb it whenever you want. So
Whenever? Okay, that's good.
So you can get around the complicated Mount Whitney permit system. This is one of my favorite passes. This is Mather Pass. You can see the trail goes right here. There was not a trail. So basically we followed footsteps up.
Everybody else's footprint.
Yes. And as far as safety gear for doing that, you'll have crampons and an ice axe. Most years it does not look like this. That was because we had about 200% snowpack in the Sierra, and it made it more complicated but more fun. So I would absolutely do it again. This is part of my hiking group. Typically, how we would go through because you're following footprints. You're kind of sometimes there's footprints. You're typically it's either map and compass or GPS navigation. You can actually use the GPS on your phone without having cell service, so you can just have the maps downloaded and have your phone in airplane mode, and it lasts a while for the battery. This is coming up Forester Pass right here. You can see it gets a little bit steep there. So Forester and Mather Pass were probably the two sketchiest passes, but I enjoyed them. You can see normally around this time of year there would be a trail. So I mean the trail itself looks a little bit sketchy. You got about 18 inches of width with a pretty steep drop on the side. And it just gets more sketchy with snow. So I would not recommend doing this if you're not experienced with mountaineering.
So the pass itself was 13,200 feet?
The top of it, yeah. That's the highest point on the Pacific Crest Trail. And this is Pinchot Pass. That was a cool one. You can see my whole hiking group here. This is my hiking group at Muir Hut. So we were kind of just a ragtag group who met around Whitney area of, this is getting real. We need to get hiking partners to group up and make sure we keep each other safe. So we hiked all the way through the Sierra together for about 350 miles. So we were together for a fairly long time compared to most people I hike with. This is just north of Yosemite, and it's a little waterfall. We actually trailblaze up from above it to get down to it because, again, the trail was non-existent. We kind of just see, I'm going down there. Okay, I'll find my way down there. So it's very cool. This is just a cool picture. And this is actually normally a water slide that people will go down. So in normal years where it's not a huge water year, people will slide down that just like a water slide. And so this year we actually put pushed rocks into it to watch them explode at the bottom. And almost
Did you say you were a rebel? Why didn't you jump in and slide it?
because I'm not suicidal. So this was actually dubbed the super melt because of all the water. This is a bridge that was washed away. I don't know if it was washed away from floods this year, but we were going through the Sierra right as all the water was melting. So it was probably the most dangerous time to be going through it, but we made it through okay. So it all works out. This is coming down Mather Pass. As you can see, there's a lot of snow melting, and it was actually pretty warm. So there was a big heat wave on top of all the snow melting, and it caused a lot of water melting. It's physics, but it's.
So when you were getting ready to traverse one of those little bridges of snow, did you guys do anything to make sure it was stable before you tried to go across it? Or did you just send
the dumb guy.
You go first.
Well, typically if we felt
rope the first
if
guy
we
up?
felt it wasn't safe, we just wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
So you would go based on time of day. If you went in the morning, it's typically good because it froze overnight.
Yeah.
But if it's in the afternoon, you're gonna be looking for it. Yeah, you can kind of see underneath them too. This was the sketchiest part of the trail.
Yeah.
This was walking along a creek. We were looking for a place to cross, and we followed footprints. And because we didn't want to backtrack, we walked along this ridge here. So it's hard to tell, but that's about a 10-foot drop. Sorry, about a 10-foot drop onto 10 to 15 onto rocks, and that is about a 25-foot drop onto a river. So that was a bit scary. Some other highlights of it: there's Yosemite Valley. We resupplied in Yosemite, so we got a ride down there. In Mammoth area, there's Devil's Postpile. So these are actually probably about a foot diameter, like hexagonal posts, just naturally formed through volcanic activity. And then you can see they slowly collapse over time. And that was a cool sunset picture. And that creek was just dubbed Wide Creek. It's not even named on maps, but because there's so much water coming down,
Wide.
it's wide.
Great name.
Yes. So this is Northern California. So that goes from Tahoe to the Oregon border, and it's part of the Cascade Mountain Range. Challenges of that were mostly long days, and I have cool pictures in here, but a lot of it was just walking through forest, which is really pretty if you're going for a day hike, but day after day of it gets a little bit kind of tiring.
Another tree.
Yeah. You close your eyes and look up again, and then, oh, look, it's the same view. So this one is Bernie Falls.
That's a beautiful place.
We got there in the afternoon, so it wasn't a great picture of it. There's better pictures you'll find online, but it was very cool. This is Echo Lake in South Lake Tahoe. This is that must be behind it. This is Lake Aloha, just north of Echo Lake. But you can see the difference here. There was maybe 1,000-foot elevation difference, and the snow level is a big difference.
Yeah.
Here's a deer, some of the wildlife there. And that's just a cool picture of Silver Lake. Other highlights of this you'll see coming up, but Mount Shasta, Mount Lassen, Castle Crags, and the Marble Mountains, all the way in Eureka area, Northern California. So this dam was Lake Britton and just north of Bernie Falls. This is Castle Crags. I had a hard time picking out which picture I liked best of that, but it was very cool. This is Mount Shasta off in the distance with the sunset. Through all of Northern California, there was lots and lots of wildfires because we had all the water, so everything grew, and then we didn't have rain most of the summer. So there's a lot of tinder to start fires. So we actually were staying barely ahead of the fires for most of it.
Wow.
So we're kind of chasing smoke and trying to stay ahead of the fire closures. Luckily, we only had to skip about 180 miles of the trail versus a lot of people had to skip 500 plus miles. And there's quite a few sections where we just missed we got ahead of the fire by like one day, and other people had to hitchhike around it. We also took a side trip to go climb Mount Shasta, and we did summit. This is just a better view. You can see all the smoke in the air, and we had some clouds too, so it wasn't a great view. But after doing this year, it wasn't crazy, but it was cool getting up to 14,000 feet again.
Is it a challenging climb?
If you haven't been hiking all summer, yes.
Okay.
The buddy that we hiked with, he made it up to about 12,500 feet. So that was really good too, considering that we were just trying to do it in a day. If you wanted to climb Mount Shasta, I'd recommend doing it as an overnight trip. Then you're only doing about 3,000 feet of elevation per day, as opposed to 6,000.
What's this one? Did you have to use your ice axe and stuff up this one?
Yeah, so my buddy was living back in Folsom, so I had him grab my micro spikes, and they're just basically small spikes that you put on your feet so you can grip in the ice, and my ice axe. And then my hiking partner had his ice axe and micro spikes mailed down to him.
Okay.
So it worked out. Yeah. There's a little bit of organization to get stuff there, but we could have rented gear as well.
Right.
Do you have to have a permit to climb Shasta?
You do, but it's very simple to get it.
Yeah.
So you basically just walk into any of the gear shops in Shasta City and say, oh, I want to get a Shasta permit for this date. So typically you can just show up day before, get your permit, rent your gear, whatever else you need, and then start hiking. And you'll do if you're trying to do it in one day, you'll start around midnight and then just hike all day until 3 p.m. And that's the 2 times I've done it, that's enough time to get up and down.
How often do they check your permits?
They don't. Not on Shasta.
What about the rest of the?
They'll only check it if you don't have one.
Murphy's Law.
I never actually had my permit checked, but I think they could smell the through hiker more so than.
Yeah.
And
You've been on the trail a lot.
yeah, and you can see the raggediness and the beard and yeah. So this is the Oregon-California border. There's a little sign there, and then just above that, there's stuff saying, "Oh, that's this far to Mexico, this far to Canada," and it's pretty cool. Oregon, the trail was a little bit flatter. Some of the highlights of that were Crater Lake, Mount Thielsen, Mount Hood. Typically, the Three Sisters Wilderness is a highlight of that, but we had to skip that section of it because of fires. And creeks and lakes were really cool as well, so we got to do swimming quite a few times. This is Crater Lake. We camped down below the rim and then started hiking at like 4 a.m. to go catch sunrise there.
Nice.
It was very cool. This is another view of Crater Lake. This right here is actually this right here. So it's kind of cool. We took the Crater Lake Rim Trail as an alternate, and then it keeps you along the rim of Crater Lake, and you get to see it all day.
Nice.
Normally that would probably be probably a 2-day hike. It's about, I think, 17 miles, but because we were in the shape we were in, we were able to do 34 miles that day. So that was my longest hiking day, actually. That was a very cool experience. This is my hiking partner, Jared. His trail name was Beast. And his parents live in Oregon, so we took a few days off in Oregon, and then his dad dropped us off above the fire closure. This was, I'm forgetting the name of this lake, but we couldn't really see much. Normally you can see a mountain back here, but because of the smoke, it obscured a lot of it. So,
Diamond Lake.
no, it wasn't Diamond Lake. It was. It wasn't a super important one.
Why are your feet yellow?
Oh, those are gators.
Oh.
So they keep they have hooks that go on your shoelaces and then keep dirt out of your shoes and socks.
Do you have a trail name?
I did. My trail name was Fire Ranger, or Franger for short. And that was because I helped some drunk guys build a campfire. And basically was keeping it alive and grabbed water for it, and so I was doing all that stuff safely. And they're like, "Dude, you're a total fire ranger." It worked. And you'd think that the Sierra was the most dangerous part, but actually it was the Yetis.
Oh yeah, that's a high danger Yetis.
Yeah. This was at the Oregon-Washington high point on the trail, so it was actually a lot lower than the Sierra. Washington had a lot of mountains you could climb on the side as well if you wanted to, which I did one of those. But the PCT itself is pretty low down. And the other highlight of Oregon is Mount Hood, so you can see a cool view of it here. And the trail actually goes all the way around it. So this was as we were leaving it, but we started out over here and then walked around it and walked over to Timberline Lodge. And so we went to Timberline Lodge and went to the buffet and stuff. But that's actually where The Shining was filmed. So it was kind of a cool historic thing as well. So we got to spend the morning there. So the border for Washington and Oregon is the Columbia River. So you cross Bridge of the Gods to get across the border. And normally you have to pay money. I think it's like $1 or $2 to basically cross it. You have to pay a toll, except for Thruhikers. They don't check permits or anything because they can tell. Yeah. But so Washington was more steep. Our mileage there dropped down from 25 to 30 miles a day to 20 to 25 miles a day because there's a lot more elevation change and a lot harder trail. Highlights of that were Goat Rocks Wilderness, Mount Rainier, Mount Baker, just the North Cascades in general were gorgeous. Challenges of that is that you start coming up on winter time. So you want to try to get done with the trail before snow hits, which, that can be anywhere from mid-September to October. Yeah. So typically the goal for most people is October 1st of getting to Canada. So this is Goat Rocks Wilderness along the Knife's Edge. It was very, very cool. This part we're actually heading up to climb Old Snowy. It was about 2 miles off trail, but it was a fun mountain to climb. You can see from the smoke here there's fires roaring all around. And actually the day we crossed this bridge, there was somebody started a fire over here and they closed the bridge to thru-hikers the day after we got through. So we were basically running away from fire the whole time we were going through Oregon and Washington.
Is that when we were at Buster Bridge?
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Oh, that is that fire.
that same fire, yeah.
Yeah, that fire was bad.
Yeah.
Jumped across the river.
Here's some more Washington pictures. This is Glacier Peak up here, or Glacier Point. But right around this time is when my phone camera started bugging out on me, and it was, I think, something broke in it, but the right side of all my pictures were blurry. But you can still see some cool stuff in there, and just the scenery was gorgeous. And I didn't get around to labeling everything either. And this is the finish. So it started snowing on us a bit. We had 4 days of snow before we got to the end of it. But just a little bit of snow powdered on the mountains was really, really cool.
Okay, you finished in September. Wow.
Yeah, so I finished September 21st. So this is the border. You can see there's a clear cut going all the way around here along the parallel. So that was about probably a 20 to 25 foot clear cut. And so we could see that for miles leading up to it. So it's like, okay, I can see where we're going, but when do we get there? Kind of thing. So
We're going to build a wall there?
Yeah, we're
And then this is the actual monument. I took a picture sitting on it, but because my phone camera broke, I didn't get any good pictures sitting on it. So I'm glad I got this one instead. And that's most of my pictures. A little bit about trail culture. Trail names I talked about. You basically get a name from something you do on trail. People try to generally avoid relating it to real life stuff unless it translates to. So, for example, one guy his trail name was Numbers because he would calculate numbers and miles and all that stuff.
How'd your buddy get the beast name?
On the second day of the trail, we were about 20 miles in, and we were we were hiking with a group then, and he was joking around saying, "Oh, well, it's only 2 more miles. That's pretty easy if you're a beast like me." And
Okay.
so it wasn't, it's one of those things where it's almost a joke kind of thing. It relates to a story because it's easier to remember a story rather than a name. I mean, how many Daniels were out there hiking this year? I don't know, but I'm sure it was a lot. Trail angels, I have a bunch of pictures of this. Trail angels are basically anybody who helps out hikers because we really could not do it without people helping us along the way. People saying, "Oh, you look really thirsty. Here, let me get you a drink or something." This is Scout and Frodo. This is Scout because he's a Boy Scout. Frodo because she was given a ring with all the Pacific Crest Trail like emblem, like the highlights on it. So everybody was joking that she's carrying the ring to Mordor. But they actually host about 40 hikers a day all through the springtime, and then arrange for rides to get them to the border. I just have some various pictures of different trail magic. So this was at day 4. Some hikers from last year came and just brought a bunch of food and beer and soda. It was great. This is Warner Springs on day 6, and they opened up their community center and let hikers camp out underneath the tree in the backyard area. Through the desert, a really big part of it is water caches. So that looks like this typically, where it's just water jugs, 5-gallon jugs. Basically, it's people who take their time and fill up water for hikers because there's several 20 to 30 mile long stretches without water, and when you're drinking a liter every 5 miles, you're carrying a lot of weight in water. And so other trail culture stuff is just kind of everybody helps each other. So it's if somebody's in need, most people will typically be like, "Oh yeah, let me help you out. Let me do whatever for you." The other thing is just kind of learning to go with the flow of things. That stuff happens. If you have to take a day off to rest up, you're taking a day off. It's not a big deal. And that's something that is hard to shift away from regular life to hiking. And all of a sudden, the schedule doesn't matter that much. The only number that matters is that you get to Canada before October 1st.
Right.
So it's a good change of pace. And it's
So you
something
build
that,
in kind of a time buffer to make that.
yeah, basically. If you see a cool lake, really lake that you want to camp at, and it's only 5 o'clock or whatever, and normally you'd be hiking for another hour or two, it's just like, okay, I'll just stop 3 miles early. And
That's great.
What's in that can?
that is soda.
Okay.
So this was outside of Big Bear, and it was right along a dirt road, so they trucked up a couch and put a bunch of soda there and snacks, and they encouraged you to take selfies on the couch and then send them to the hostel that was doing it. So it's very cool. Along with this is staying in towns. Typically, there wasn't always a hostel in town, but typically probably about 50% of the time there was. Other times you would just camp out, like at Warner Springs here, and you can use the town resources, and sometimes they'll have bucket showers available, or you can maybe rent a shower from a campground or whatever. It varies from town to town, but I think I only spent 4 nights in a hotel for the whole thing. So it's a very, very cheap vacation. I think total it's about $1,000 a month to do it. So it's the hard part is getting time off of work for it.
How many pairs of shoes did you go through?
I went through 5 pairs of shoes.
Wow. How do you get yourself shoes? You just have them out somewhere? Or you go
Yeah.
there in town?
So I bought shoes in advance, which was a mistake because they didn't end up lasting very long, only about 400 miles per pair of shoes. The pair of shoes I switched to that after that was with the Hoka brand shoes. I switched to New Balance Leadville shoes for the second half of the hike, and one pair of those lasted about 850 miles, and the second pair lasted 200 miles before I got to the border, and I still have them. They're the ones I usually wear to work, actually.
So did you wear, even in the snow, just a hiking shoe type?
Through the Sierra, I switched to hiking boots, but I would have been better off with trail running shoes because no matter what happens, your feet are going to get wet. Waterproof boots don't help with snow getting in over the top of them.
Even with the gaiters?
I ended up not wearing gaiters when I had the boots because you're also going across rivers, typically 3 creeks a day. And for the most part, you just get used to walking with wet feet because it's it's a little bit of a pain to take your boots off and switch to
Water shoes.
yeah. And a lot of people weren't even carrying water shoes. One guy I was hiking with hikes with a pair of boots and then had a pair of light trail runners for crossing creeks. But I just got used to having my feet wet all the time. Sometimes you take a half-hour break and dry your feet out a little bit, but
Any problem with blisters?
Yeah,
That's what I was
Feet wet?
wondering.
in the desert, I didn't have blisters through the Sierra because we were doing a lot less miles because of the snow and the elevation. So we're doing about typically 15 to 20 miles through the Sierra. But once I started going in Northern California again, I had to get my feet toughened back up again because the wetness got rid of a lot of the blisters and the calluses. Yeah. So if you wanted to hike the PCT, the way you prepare for that, your research, there's countless blogs, Instagrams, guidebooks. The one that's typically the go-to is Yogi's PCT handbook. And she's hiked the trail 3 times now, and she's got good information in there. I bought the book, and she actually has perforated pages for town information that you can tear out. So you can, mail ahead the section for the 3 towns you're getting to next. And it has all the town guide and has a little map of the town, and it's very, very useful. My hiking partner ended up carrying the maps and that, and I carried an extra large battery pack for his phone. So it ended up evening out in weight.
Did you have a solar charger?
I did for the desert. It didn't end up working out very well. It broke at some point in the middle there. So from then on, I just switched to using a bigger battery pack and charging that up at towns. Most people get away with a 10,000 milliamp battery pack. I was carrying a 20,000 one, but I think for any future hiking I'm going to be doing, I'm going to go with the 10,000 one just because it weighed too much to be worth it. As far as navigation and maps, there's a few different options for maps. There's half-mile maps. There's forgetting the name of one other one, but I bought the half-mile maps, and they charge you, I think it was $35 to print all of them, so they're not really making a profit, just covering costs of printing and mailing. But also there's apps on your phone. So there's gut hooks and there's a half-mile app on your phone that use your GPS location and tell you where the next water source is, where the next town is. It's very, very cool. A lot of people get by without using maps at all. I'd recommend carrying them as a backup, but yeah. As far as training, just walking. You're not going to be trained for it either way. So the first few weeks, you're getting used to trained up.
The training is the first few weeks on the trail, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Wow.
Start slow, take it easy, and let your body ease into it. For gear, it's typically I'm going to stick to lightweight stuff. I have another slide on that. And the other part is the mindset of you have to be. It's going to be uncomfortable at times, but it's have you guys heard of the 2 types of fun? There's type 1 fun of going to the movies or something. You show up, have fun, and then go home, and you don't really have a cool story to talk about. Versus type 2 fun, where it's uncomfortable at times, but you get a really, really neat experience out of it in the end. And this is definitely a type 2 fun.
Did you ever consider giving up?
Absolutely. In Northern California, if you had pulled up to one of the dirt roads and said, "Hey, hop in, I'm taking you home," I would have done it. the main reason my hiking partner and I joined up from Tahoe on was because we both realized, oh, we don't have the mental toughness to get through this by ourselves, because we had both been hiking pretty much solo before that, but it was like we realized that it's like, okay, you need
Push each
somebody
other.
else to
Push
help
each
push
other.
you. Yeah. And a lot of people hike with a trail family. I never really developed one of those. The closest I got to that was hiking the group I hiked with in the Sierra, where we were together for about 300 miles. But you get to know people really fast because you're all doing the same thing, and there's not really any barriers blocking you from getting to know each other.
How much weight did you lose?
So in the first 2 weeks, at mile 210, I stayed the night at my aunt and uncle's house, and I had lost 15 pounds.
In 2 weeks.
Yeah. So a lot of that was water weight, a lot of it was food weight. Then after that, your body gets used to needing to eat more.
Yeah.
So I physically just didn't have the appetite to eat the amount of calories I was burning. So after that, I switched to carrying more food and carrying more junk food, because that's the only way I could actually force myself to eat enough. So through Northern California and Oregon and Washington, I was carrying excess food, and I actually didn't really lose weight at all. I gained most of my weight back when I was home for a week and a half before entering the Sierra, and then I stayed pretty consistent. I was about 10 pounds under my normal weight, but I wasn't underweight at all. As far as gear goes, there's the big three. You got your tarp. This is my tarp tent setup. So it's basically you use your hiking pole and then stakes to stake out the side. It's pretty much the lightest weight tarp system you'll have with a bug net. Some people will just do the tarp itself and just use trekking poles and poles, so it keeps rain off but no bugs. Some people just even use a bivy sack. That's just more or less a waterproof thing that goes outside of your sleeping bag, and it can be waterproof. Some of them aren't, but it keeps bugs out. Your backpack is typically 60 liters or less. This is a 65-liter backpack with a roll top, meaning I could roll the top down, and the whole second half of the hike, I was using maybe about 45 liters of it. It was pretty much always rolled down to it wasn't fully loaded pretty much ever. The sleep system, I use a ground sheet, a thermarest, a quilt. So that's basically just a sleeping bag that has clips instead of a zipper. It saves a little bit of weight, and it's a little bit more comfortable if you're you can have more of the more loft in there for the weight than the zipper itself. And I used a sleeping bag liner through the Sierra and actually northward because it was comfortable. But if you're going super lightweight, you're gonna not be carrying one of those.
You didn't pop your thermarest?
No, I didn't actually. I used it somewhat recently too, and it still functions fine. As far as water filter goes, it's recommended you filter all the water you drink. In the Sierra, when you're above 10,000 feet, there's not much that can contaminate it. So I didn't bother filtering for probably a month there. I didn't get sick from it, so it worked out okay. But the Sawyer squeeze is what most hikers use. Basically, you have a pouch, and then you squeeze water through the filter into a bottle. And it's lightweight, it's easy to use, and it's easy to clean out as well.
Sounds better than pumping.
Oh, much better than pumping.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will just take the smart water bottles and fill those up and screw it onto the Sawyer, and then not even filter it, just filter it when they drink it. So it's saves weight, saves time. It's very efficient. As far as cooking, the other side of that is if you want to carry a stove. I did because I like having hot food at the end of the day, and it's good for mental sanity. But if you're trying to go really fast and push a lot of miles, you can get by with using a peanut butter jar or a lightweight jar. You can put cold water in and couscous or ramen, and it's called cold soaking. It does not taste good. but it makes your dehydrated food, edible. Yeah, keeps you alive. And that goes into ultralight / minimalism. That's essentially a mentality of, I'm only carrying what I need because my goal is to be out here hiking. If I'm getting to camp early and wanting a comfort item, it means I stopped hiking too early. So, typically those guys are going to be doing 35 plus miles every single day and have their backpacks are going to weigh under 10 pounds with everything
Does that
other than
take
food.
points off the fun scale then?
That is fun for them.
I guess. All right. Okay.
And that's just about it. I have more information here. You can go to the PCTA, that's Pacific Crest Trail Association's website. They have a lot of information on that. As I mentioned before, you can look at people's Instagrams or blogs. Yogi's PCT Handbook. This guy's site is great. He takes Halfway Anywhere he's a guy who's hiked the trail in the past and collates a lot of information and writes articles about it. Craig's PCT Planner is a great way to plan out your resupply strategy. Typically, it's just buy food as you go, but some towns don't have, they might have a convenience store, and it's hard to buy 5 days worth of food at a convenience store, at a gas station. So his site is really good for breaking down, there's, X number of miles between these 2 points. If you're hiking this many miles per day with, he'll take that into account, the elevation change, and basically it's a very useful tool for estimating the number of days that you're going to be in between resupply points. And he also collates a lot of data for surveys, so I have a little bit of that here. Just some information. It is, even though my Sierra group was all guys, that last year was about 42% women hiking. A lot of white people hiking. Education actually is pretty much everybody. About 75% of the people have some form of degree, which is kind of surprising, but it makes sense of if you're the type to set goals, you're gonna set goals to do something like this maybe. And age was very diverse as well. Most people were 25 to 29, but you guys can see the numbers there. Like there's people all the way over 70 a little bit too, and it's really anybody could go out and do it.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then any questions?
It said only 50%. It was like 50% were in their 20s. That means past your 20s.
Yeah. So I mean, that's typically the easiest way. I'm at a stage of life right now where I don't have to worry about kids or wife or anything, so that makes it easier. But it's anybody could go out and do it. You just have to make a little bit of a sacrifice and actually want to do it. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. Because it's not for everybody. But
I'm thinking Mr. Imbriani might not want to do this.
I was thinking of doing it backwards. Walking backwards.
Walking backwards. You always see where you came from.
I noticed, Mr. Daniel, that you didn't mention any injuries.
So
that actually were, died, but I noticed that you didn't mention any injuries. How was that?
So I had a few different injuries. Most of them were minor enough that it's not a huge deal. I started developing shin splints in Northern California because I'd gotten used to doing about 15 to 20 miles a day, and then we were averaging 27 miles a day for about 3 weeks straight. So I started developing shin splints and just had to slow down there. I also got a sore on my back where it got infected with staph infection, actually.
Wow.
So I had to, we hopped off trail with Beast's brother, and I went to the hospital and got antibiotics for it, and that cleared up fine. So I also got a spider bite that got infected in the desert because I was cowboy. It was either a spider bite or an ant bite. I'm not sure which, but that got infected on my leg, and I got antibiotics for that, and it worked out okay. I was a little bit more injury prone than most hikers. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There was one point in this year where it was right after Mather Pass, and I was low on water, so I was really dehydrated because it's hard to eat snow that much. And we were about to stop for lunch, and there was about a maybe 3 foot gap in between a boulder and snow. And one of the guys in my group had hopped up on top of the boulder to get over to the other side, because the other option was to go all the way down about a 20-foot snow hill and then back up. So I was thinking, oh, I'll just hop over it. And because I was dehydrated, I was tired, I wasn't thinking. My foot actually slipped out from underneath the snow there, and I dropped about 10 feet, well, 8 to 10 feet flat onto my back. And I wasn't injured because my backpack was on, and luckily nothing was broken. But that was a wake up call.
Yeah.
That was about 4 days into the Sierra, and it's like, oh, this is serious. If something happens, I'm getting helicoptered out, and
What kind of, you had a picture of a deer, what other wildlife?
so I saw 3 bears total. One of them was when we were driving up Mount Shasta. One of them was when I was in Yosemite, and one of them was in Northern California. There might have been one more in Oregon, but it was hunting season in Oregon, so I think for the most part they avoided people. Saw a lot of deer. I didn't even bother to count them because there's so many. And saw a lot of marmots. They're basically fat chipmunks that live above 8,000 feet. And a lot of mice in Oregon and Washington. They chewed through a hole in my backpack at one point, on the back part.
You see any Yeti?
No Yeti, unfortunately. I was really hoping for one. We were going right through Bigfoot area.
What do you do in the areas where bear canisters are required?
I carried a bear canister. So from Kennedy Meadows South all the way to Yosemite, you're required to carry a bear canister.
Which one did you carry?
The Bear Vault 500. So it's the biggest size one. It has the screw top.
Okay, clear one.
Yeah, the clear blue one.
Yeah.
Oh. And actually didn't. Don't tell them. Don't tell the rangers this, but I actually carried extra food too. And so I had a Ursack, so it's a bear-proof tie bag. It's basically made of a bag made of Kevlar, so bears can't get through it. So that's also bear safe.
I'm not worried about the bear eating my food. I'm worried about him getting mad that he can't get that sack open and trying to eat me. So what do you put it up in a tree or in a rock somewhere?
So most of the time I hung the bear sack. A lot of the time I didn't even worry about it because we were above 10,000 feet. There's still snow on the ground. What would a bear be doing up here? Only crazy people are going up here.
Of which I'm one.
I'm the first to admit that.
Well, thanks for doing that. Thanks for putting this all together.
Thanks.